Hello everyone. Because of the stuff that's happening in South Africa, but we're gonna record this anyway. Let's see if she shows up. This call for me is key. It's it shouldn't be happening because we're actually leaving for Belgium early in the morning. So I'm really fitting this in because I want this call to happen. I'm excited about this call for me. It's an important call. Um, I'm glad Lisa's here. We've um we've been discovering the sleep playlist thing since last year because of Lisa. You're responsible for that. Um, it's still a mystery. The feedbacks have been really amazing. When I first created them, I partly wasn't sure what it was, but I had an intuition that it was going to work. Later on, I looked at the sciences and there were so many interesting things that came up, and I want to maybe bring those up now. I think for facilitators, this is a really interesting topic, not just for you to use the sleep playlists while sleeping, either for yourself or for others. I think the style of facilitation live in the inner dance format can learn a lot from the sleep playlist. So the feedbacks are good, but I think the structural elements are going to be really interesting. So once again, going into a Zoom call, recording the Zoom call and sharing this to those who are going to be listening to this when they're able would serve the community. First and foremost, if I'm just going to launch into this, and maybe we can talk about people who've been trying to use this and whatnot. The sleeping playlists are changing a lot of perspectives. They are like, it's a game changer. It's radically, hugely, like, paradigmatically, it's a revolution. The biggest thing that I've heard as a feedback from people is this realization that, there's this transmission concept where you need a facilitator to be there holding your body while you go through the waves. The sleeping playlist is the penultimate argumentation that no, no one is needed. Already the playlists that we sent out in IDS and Inner Intensive Studios Mundos, that already was quite huge, that people were having maybe even deeper experiences alone while awake. But it's, in some ways, I don't know exactly how, but in some ways even bigger, that people are experiencing these changes while they're sleeping. So it means there's something in the wave that holds patterns, partly technological, that brings about short or long-term changes in the human. What personally I love the most about the sleep playlists is the fact that everyone is just so busy. Yeah, we're so busy. Everyone's so busy. So we're sleeping 1/3 of 24 hours. Roughly, you're supposed to be sleeping at 8 hours a day. So if you're super busy and there's so much that needs to be done, why could you not use that time? So everyone's talking about optimizing and becoming efficient, and it's not like the most amazing thing. It's like, when you're sleeping, why don't you do the work? Right? It's like, wow, that's like mind-blowing. The second thing I love about the sleep playlists would be, if you were going to talk to doctors, especially, and you wanted like something that would hold this energy that wouldn't be weird, that would be accessible to the most conservative patient, that vibration works, what would be a tool that brings that medicine about? It's going to be this. This is explainable. This is, it's so intuitively logical. that the sleep playlists can do something. So doctors can use this a lot more easily than um than facilitating like an inner dance or a session for the patients, asking them to lay down. And number three, I think we need to hold habit forming modalities that can be done on a regular basis. And this one takes no effort because you're there. So if people knew that it's going to help them get there anyway, then all well and good. So collating the feedback, what we found out is, yes, it helps people sleep. There are people like Christina who said, no, it's actually the opposite. It keeps me up. But maybe you're not supposed to be sleeping if you're not going to sleep on these playlists, because when we understand the concept of paradoxical sleep, the only reason why we sleep is actually to wake something up. Because when you read the brain when it's in REM sleep, there's actually very little difference between wake state brain and REM sleep state brain. So there are people who don't actually need to sleep as much when they go into the inner dance process in many ways. So I think those are interesting points to bring up as to why this is interesting, relevant. There's probably more reasons why we should look at this. So historically, the sleep playlists that been passed around, that began with the Josh case study and then got passed around, it was accidental. So this is in its infancy. This is embryonic, meaning the playlist that I made for Lisa was purely accidental because it took so little time to construct something so long, like 15 minutes to construct like a two plus hour playlist. So this can totally be improved upon if there were more hours to work on it with maybe experts in sound production, so on and so forth. So I do feel that there's something in our technology that can be mimicked by those who know what they're doing. Like, I just really put stuff together. So I think, yeah, it's important to say that this is only just starting. So let me just go into some of the sciences so that we're not going to loop in this in a non-structural way. I'm going to go into the board in order to do this. Okay. Let's go to this board. Okay, I brought this up in an old Zoom call, but I think it's good to refresh. This one right here. Hope my board works. So what we're looking at is called oh, now my pen's not working. I tested it. This should be working. Oh no. Okay, so that super sucks. Wait. Close this and open it up again because it's really important. Draw. That I can draw. Yeah. Okay, good. So I never tried that before. For vocabularization in your brain, this is called the HPA axis. All right. So we've talked about the hypothalamus a lot. The HPA axis is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Okay, so they work in tandem. There are different axes like the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, the gonads being the reproductive organs, and then the thyroid is also the HPT axis. So this is going to be super useful for you to know in general. And the sleep playlists actually act on the HPA axis a lot. So get to know it. Let's see how much we can formulate around this axis. So the hypothalamus, as we've talked about it, is more or less like the central governing system that commands the other endocrine glands. So inner dance like hits the hypothalamus quite a bit, very easily. Like for example, when you think about the pineal system, the melatonin, a lot of that's regulated by the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which holds the clockwork of the body, which is also in the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus coordinates the okay, not this one. The hypothalamus coordinates the sympathetic nervous system, which regulates like fear states or excitatory states in the middle, and then inhibitory relaxant states like at the top and at the bottom. The thoracolumbar region is the sympathetic nervous system, and then the cranium and the sacrum implicates the parasympathetic nervous system. So going back here, what we're talking about this because the adrenal system regulates obviously adrenaline, or what we might call epinephrine or norepinephrine. Okay, so as you know, that is a stimulant chemical. It makes things go exciting or anxious. So when people are in a sympathetic system, the adrenal cortex is very much involved. So what we need to talk about initially, especially maybe in relationship with sleep, is stress. A lot of this is just stating the obvious. If you're in a stress response system, it means that your adrenal cortex is overworked. And when you go to sleep, and your adrenal system is hyper activated, then it's just hard to go to sleep. And even when you're sleeping, the logic would go that we're not able to access like deep rest, right? So that's why the HPA axis is interesting and important to understand. So when people go to sleep, let's say go to bedtime. Sorry, my writing board is just really clumsy. That doesn't look like a moon. When they go to sleep, the HPA axis is actually still at work. Because when you think of, let's say, the stress hormone, which is otherwise called cortisol, cortisol isn't just the stress response mechanism. It actually holds possible roles in metabolism. You know, it actually has healthy. There are such things as healthy stress factors. So cortisol doesn't need to be like an evil thing that's just there to help you manage horrible instances. And when cortisol is balanced during nighttime, the HPA axis actually then holds like healing elements. So when we think about, let's say, the sleep stages, cortisol plays a role here. So we've looked at this particular, wait, let me see who came in. Hoping maybe that's Lee. Okay, it's Celine. Oh no, it's Caro. Hi. Okay, so going back here. Okay, we've looked at this so many times that initially, like non-REM or slow wave sleep happens more frequently and more deeply anyway. It goes deeper in the first hours of sleep, and then that lightens, let's say, in the later hours of sleep, and then REM happens longer. We've gone over that so many times. I think something I want to think about is okay, you're going through these waves up and down, like for you to go back to REM, you need to go back to stage 4, stage 2, then to REM, back to stage 2, stage 3, back to REM. Why is it that you can't actually just stay in REM if a lot of healing, a lot of metabolism and immunity happens in REM? It means that there's something to do with brain waves that needs to go through this constant balancing act of like adjustments and regulatory activities. So when you do then compare, let me see if I have a slide that looks at the cortisol. Okay, so if cortisol is the stress hormone, cortisol at its height or peak would be around here. Okay, that's the black line, be around 9 o'clock in the morning, and it starts to decrease throughout the day. So your optimal stress response system would be here, where you would be able to manage stress the most. So the nadir, or the lowest point of cortisol, would be just around, maybe it's usually regarded to be 2 hours after going to sleep, which is here. And then cortisol would start rising again, usually around midnight and onwards. So it actually rises up right around here. So one of the reasons then why people are sleeping so, pardon my French, but shittily, why they're losing sleep is probably what we might surmise, and this is supported by research, is when cortisol levels don't actually go down the way they're supposed to, and then they kind of stay up, then that causes things like insomnia, sleep deprivation. People try to sleep, and even if they do, they wake up at certain times of the night. This is what's implicated. The HPA axis is more or less taking over a lot of the other systems. So let's go back to the HPA axis. This is another view of the HPA axis. Okay, so there's here, we see like a signaling system. The hypothalamus sends a signal called, and the signaling mechanism is called CRH, which is corticotropin releasing hormone. And people regard pituitary to be the gland that's like the executive governor. They say it's a crown chakra, but it's actually the hypothalamus is signaling the anterior pituitary that, okay, you need to wake up because there's something stressful that's supposed to be happening. So it sends this thing called adrenocorticotropin hormone, or corticotropic hormone, yeah, which then sends another signal to the adrenal gland to then send out cortisol. So when you think about cortisol is actually just an effect of a whole series of message carrying mechanisms. So a lot of it actually starts here in the hypothalamus. And because the hypothalamus is super duper busy trying to regulate like all these systems, like from breathing to heart rate to digestion, sexual behavior, cognition, everything to do with autonomic nervous system. When there's a lot of stress and a lot of fear, then the attention it could place upon all the other possible healing systems are lessened because of stress. Okay, that's basically what stress does. So going back into the sleep cycles, one of the reasons why REM actually starts to go longer is by this time, you just see like this up and down thing, and each of these is actually like an inner dance wave. So don't think that the whole sleeping cycle is like one inner dance wave. Like each of this is one inner dance wave lasting around 90 minutes long. So remember, like the cortisol level would probably go down here. This would be the nadir. This would be the lowest. It's probably like coming from here, not that height. And then around here, it starts to rise up and rise up all the way to maybe 9 a.m. would be like the peak point, if you remember what that looked like. So there's cortisol that's activating here. and like here. So cortisol's kind of healthy actually. It's needed to allow for longer REM, but in the beginning you don't actually need it, and um that like a lot of that is supposed to help with the production of slow wave sleep. So you can see what's happening when cortisol level doesn't go down because people are exposed to too much artificial lighting, cell phones, internet, and so on and so forth. When people don't get access to non-REM sleep or slow wave sleep, then it's very difficult for them to go into REM state. So one of the reasons then why the sleep playlist works is when we are able to like accelerate the like deep sleep patterns to make this actually even longer, but at the same time to hold some of the elements that would later come up in REM sleep that would make this duration like a lot longer. The whole point of the sleep playlists is that if REM sleep here is longer, we can actually make this longer, like the early REM. See what I mean? And if you can make this longer earlier on, at the onset of sleep, you don't actually then need to keep going into the cycle of REM up and down, up and down. We don't exactly know what's happening, but based on feedbacks, based on my observations, one of the reasons why the sleep playlist is longer is working is because we're bringing this earlier rather than later, and then we're elongating the durations because that's how the sleep playlists were designed. That was actually the intention. The reason why they're only 2.5 hours or 3 hours long is like for the Josh playlist, remember? Like they're only so long. They only last for up to here. They're this long, right? Then the music stops, but right there, then and there, the REM state has actually healed. A lot of things that might have taken a long time. So you have the rest of the hours in the day, in the night, sorry, in order to do whatever repair, rejuvenation needs to happen. Okay, so I think that's a good starting point. Let's see, where was that other thing? So wait, let me look at my notes because there's a whole bunch of ideas around this. I want to sure don't want to get lost. Yeah, so let's talk about cortisol and what cortisol does, because it's exciting for me to understand what cortisol actually does. Let's define it here. Okay, why is that red? Okay, cortisol. I don't like this writing board. Cortisol. I just need to reposition myself because I'm drawing from an awkward place in my handwriting. It's just horrible. Right now, you don't deserve that. Cortisol has several things it does. If we're not gonna damn cortisol and just keeping it like a stress hormone. So cortisol in some parts of the adrenal cortex. Wait, let's open up a chart that looks at the parts of the adrenal cortex. Here, I just drew this out actually a minute before we started. The adrenal cortex has 3 parts. It says here 4, but it's technically regarded 3 because the adrenal medulla isn't technically in the cortex. The glomerulosa, fasciculata, and reticularis. So here's what we're talking about, mostly cortisol. The adrenal medulla is interesting because it's in charge of sending out very excitatory neurotransmitters and hormones, which is epinephrine and norepinephrine. So when the adrenal cortex is overstimulated, then even while you're sleeping, if you're stressed out, the sympathetic nervous system is still on, meaning you're still actually like in a fight or flight reflex action when you're sleeping. Going back to some of the roles the cortisol plays in that whole mapping, one of the roles cortisol plays is it helps in the production of glucose and glycogen. So for those who understand or have a relationship with sugar, I see Gra smiling. I said that on purpose. You know what sugar does? When sugar level goes high, which is what we call hyperglycemia, then you feel kind of sugary. And then when you sustain that for a long time, one of cortisol's jobs, so if there's a lot of cortisol, what it actually does is it elevates glucose in the blood. Its effect is hyperglycemia. So one of the trigger mechanisms the hypothalamus works with actually that makes cortisol levels goes up is hypoglycemia. So when you have low blood sugar levels, then that means that you need more glucose, and glycogen is basically like a chain of glucose molecules. Okay, so that's maybe one of the more direct effects cortisol has on the sympathetic nervous system, glucogenesis or glycogenesis or gluconeogenesis. The other one that would be more interesting that's stress related would be something to do with norepinephrine. Okay, so norepinephrine is like the adrenaline in the brain. So when you have high norepinephrine, it means that you're excited, you're stimulated, you're high up. Now, when you think about REM, for you to go into REM, okay, this is really important. For you to go into REM sleep, you cannot have any norepinephrine being released and received in the system. Okay, REM sleep happens when there's no norepinephrine in the system. So Artie, you can make sense of this, that when your cortisol levels are high, then norepinephrine is stimulated. Now, cortisol doesn't create norepinephrine. What cortisol does is it increases the sensitivity of your norepinephrine receptors sensitivity, so that even a little bit of norepinephrine will be felt by your body. You see what I mean? So it's a more indirect way in which the sympathetic nervous system would be activated. I just say indirect because it doesn't actually cause the excitement. It's norepinephrine that causes the stimulation. But cortisol holds a kind of modulatory role that amplifies the effect of norepinephrine. So do you see the point here that if in REM state, there are two neurotransmitters that should not be elevated or even happening at all. One of them is serotonin, which is like it's weird. Serotonin is like the satisfaction chemical, but it's also the emotional, like let's say attachment chemical. So you can't have that when you're in your REM state, because that will shorten the distance of synaptic connections. When you're attached, you can't actually perceive as much. So serotonin levels go down during REM sleep. But the other one that goes way, way down, almost absent, is norepinephrine. So when your cortisol levels are high, then your norepinephrine system is still elevated. That's why you don't go into REM sleep when you have high cortisol levels in the blood. Do you get that? This should already be interesting for facilitators, because hi Lee, you made it. When facilitators of inner dance or Kundalini try to go too much into the yellow chakra system, when they keep trying to punch their way through the adrenal area, when you keep trying to make people cry, scream, when you try to make power emerge from there, go emotional, go wild, you're actually helping with the release of cortisol in people's systems. And a lot of what I've just described is at work where epinephrine, norepinephrine sensitivities shoot off the roof. And people aren't actually able to go into REM state experiences if we were to use the sleep stages as a metaphor for the inner dance journey. It can seem spectacular what's happening to the body, but what we're actually mimicking is just N1, N2 sleep stages. So this is one of the main reasons why we're using the sleep playlists. It's to help the body that's experiencing too much cortical release because of the problems they have to deal with in wake states, because of anxiety, which is, for me, usually when you have too much that needs to be done, that's bottlenecked. When you have so many goals, like so many things that need to be done in a sequence in the day, for me, that's usually when cortisol levels go really, really high. Especially cortisol isn't normally about short-term stress. Let's say you have a particular problem today that's unique. Cortisol level that's long-term is usually what becomes problematic when it becomes like habitual, when people are in constant danger, fear states, like all the time. So let's go back to the screen just so we can complete some of this mapping. So let me take away the serotonin and REM part. Yeah, so an article that I shared in Studios Mundos last week is that people suffering from insomnia, meaning like they can't sleep at night. I'm sure some of you are experiencing that sometimes or all the time. It's not always like a negative. Means that there's an overexpression of beta waves, like in the brain. Beta that's supposed to actually go down or decrease during nighttime. When people are still exhibiting beta power in their brain, then they can't sleep. So in terms of brain, breath, and blood, where else we can implicate cortisol and the HPA axis is this. So understanding how the mapping of the sympathetic nervous system, which extends from the thoracolumbar region, and the parasympathetic nervous system that extends from the cranium and the sacrum, when people are sending out a lot of norepinephrine at night or in the day, a lot of the extensions, the ganglion, the bundle axons that extend from the sympathetic nervous system increases the heart rate. So in REM state mappings, when people go into where's that? Normally, when people go into REM states, right here, like temperature, core body temperature is still a little bit high, heart rate still a little bit high. But when you go deep here, heart rate needs to go slower. So even as vibration kind of goes higher here, heart rate stays a little bit slow, maybe except if you're having a nightmare. It does go up a little bit, but essentially it needs to hold like a really, really slow pacing. And that's one of the reasons why REM state does not require REM state doesn't require norepinephrine. So when you do measure body movements, like when people are going into the sleep cycles, the body's kind of moving here still in N1, N2, and then you experience, like the sleep spindles that happens in stage 2. But when stage 3 and stage 4 happens, when delta starts to increase, body goes into muscular paralysis. which is kind of amazing, so that even when you're experiencing like these wake-like properties during REM state sleep, like it seems like you're awake here, the body doesn't actually move at all. And so your heart rate stays really, really slow, somewhat when you're in REM state. So let's say going back to here, when you have high cortisol levels in the blood and your norepinephrine sensitivity is high, you're not actually going into that muscular paralysis system, because your sympathetic nervous system is still so amplified that you have beta waves still spread across the body, most likely the left hemisphere of the brain. So a lot of the reason why your heart rate goes up has to do with phenomenon called vasoconstriction. So sorry, that's a misspell. Vasoconstriction, which is when the blood vessels start to contract. Constriction. Sorry. This is one of the effects of cortisol. Both cortisol and norepinephrine. Because your blood vessels are constricted, then your heart needs to pump faster. So stroke volume and heart rate would increase cardiac output. And so that's one of the reasons why beta waves are happening. So unless your blood vessels kind of expand, then these are like indirect effects. So so when we amplify the sympathetic nervous system whilst sleeping, one of the other direct effects of that is there's a decrease in the production of hormones that are responsible for immunity. Which is to say, if your cortisol levels are high when you're sleeping, that means you're not healing. So when you have all these problems, like listed by doctors, okay, you have all these problems, it's because your body is not healing you when you're like that. When you're supposed to be sleeping, and when you're maybe it's more like that. You're not healing, which is what sleep is all about. When you go to sleep in order to heal. But when you're going to sleep and you're still working out problems in your body because you had all this tension and all these problems, your immunity levels go down. You have all these enzymes and all these like histamine, for example, actually keeps people awake, but histamine levels kind of go up when we're sleeping, because histamines are immunity responses of the body. So when high cortisol is happening, histamine goes down. There are all of these other enzymes that actually are supposed to heal the body. But when you're busy just being stressed out, then you're not healing. Does that make sense to you? It's like you're not healing when you're sleeping, and the main function of sleeping is to rejuvenate, to repair. So there's something about sound, there's something about the playlisting element that allows for the cortisol levels to balance out, to decrease faster, and yet to then actually elevate to a healthy level, because cortisol does hold metabolic and immunity functions, because glucose and glycogen in the blood isn't just negative. It's just that when you have too much of it, because you know what happens when you feel weak, when you didn't, let's say, eat enough sugar based products. Let's say you didn't take food that contained carbohydrates enough and fat enough or glucose enough, you feel weak. So glucose actually helps with metabolism. If you know what the mitochondria does. It burns fuel, but at the same time, it produces like proteins, it produces steroids, and a lot of that is supposed to assist the body. So my take on this is that the modern lifestyle has over cortisolized the system. It's over corticalized the system, and we need to achieve not just zero stress. I think that's also the problem. People are trying to escape stress. I think there is such a thing as healthy stress when you're able to face the problems completely, face life. So one of the main purposes or functions or techniques of the sleep playlist is this. It's very, very simple actually. When we're constructing these, one of the main elements that can assist in balancing out cortisol would be very, very simply this. There would be all those other neurotransmitters that are like downers or depressants, like acetylcholine, oxytocin that helps to relax. But it's really GABA that is the main inhibitory chemical of the nervous system. When you have like, so it's a downer. Okay, this is confusing. This is a downer, but what we want to do is to actually increase the downer. Because when there's too many uppers, this is like an upper. So is norepinephrine, so is epinephrine, so is dopamine. You actually need to balance a lot of that out. So GABA acts as a modulator that helps to balance a lot of those out. And when GABA increases, what also increases is delta activity. Delta begins to spread across the cortex, the cortical structures. When delta goes up, then that's when slow wave sleep is happening. So a lot of the slower kind of white noise, what those delta meditative tracks are in the playlists that we use, that basically increases GABA activity, like in the entire central and peripheral nervous system. So beta starts to decrease, and when delta increases, you actually then increase gamma, which is faster than beta. It holds more frequency data than beta. So when you study the sleep playlists, it holds a lot of this kind of noise app or white noise. It holds a lot of noise, which has ways of spreading out like oscillations. So that's the basic reason why the sleep playlists are constructed the way they are and why they are then working the way they are, because it usually takes a while for GABA to be sent out and also for that to be enough. That's what slow wave sleep actually does. It inhibits a lot of the excitatory, stimulatory activities that are taking place throughout the brain. Okay, so that's it. It's as simple as that. That's what I wanted to share. Comprehensive yet simplified mapping of what the sleep playlists are, what they do, what's the logic behind them, why are they working, and how would you apply some of these principles to your own processes so that you're not just stimulating people. So I think that's why the feedback coming from South Africa makes sense. That let's say and we can ask maybe Lee to give context to some of the stuff that they're doing. Mainly we're interested in the work there because it's mainly to do with addiction cases. It's in an addiction clinic, and based on the statistic, most of the addictions are to uppers. I forgot the kind of drug, which is like methamphetamine. So people aren't like going into ecstasies and catharsis and like, joy in their process. They're just basically resting. Some are falling asleep, but the feedbacks they're getting is this is exactly what I need right now, as opposed to you coming over and then poking my body and making me like get stimulated. So it could be possible that modern humans, whether it be in the south, the east, the west, or the north, a lot of people are overstimulated. So another kind of playlist needs to come out. And based on Christina's reflection today, okay, the sleep playlists don't actually make me go to sleep. It probably makes me go more into an inner dance like wave. Um, it depends on where you're coming from. Okay, so maybe Lee, because you're helping to hold this call, there might be some insights, questions, ideas, or just basic context on what's happening there. Uh, yeah,
Hi.
because yeah,
My internet is telling me it's a little bit unstable, so just tell me to put off my video, but I'll leave it on for now.
it sounds
Just
good for now.
good. Let's see where this goes. Okay, so we're holding these sessions at the moment for an organization who basically there's about 100 people that actually is in this clinic. Apparently I haven't actually been there, but my assistant, Ricky, he's actually been to the premises and he's seen the different homes, the spaces that these people are living in. The one is about 60 men. I think it's about 60 men and about 10 women. And then there's another, it's like it is a clinic, but it's this is a really, really poor area in a township. So it's actually quite rough. Like I drove there the one day to drop two of the ladies off because it was raining and they needed a lift back. And it's like a rough area. Like if you step out your car, like you might get stabbed or shot. Like it's like that type of area. So like you don't want to really be walking around there. But so it's quite interesting. So we've actually not been holding spaces in their clinic. We've been holding spaces like really close by in like a library. And it's been just the most incredible experience to work with these people and getting to know them and getting to see just how we're actually all the same. I think that's also been such a key element for me. I think that I was quite afraid, actually. I was talking to Pi a few months ago that I'm really resistant in working with the men. There was a lot of fear that it brought up for me. And funnily enough, when I held space for the men a few weeks ago, I found it even easier than holding space for the women, which was completely not what I was expecting. So this group of people, it's a variety of ages. There's quite a few young people, and then some of the men, I mean, they were quite old, like they were maybe in their 50s or 60s. There was even one man that could have been in his 70s. I don't know, obviously, all their stories. Because of like, I don't know much about drugs and how much they cost. And I've kind of spoken to some people about it, but there's particular drug that's very popular called TIC, and it's basically it's like what's the word for it? It's just quickly Googling it now because I think it's yeah, it's crystal meth. It's crystal meth. That's what it is. And a lot of them are addicted to that. There's a lot of them that are TIC addicts. There's a few heroines. There's a few alcohol, and maybe a few others. I don't remember all of the names. So what's been amazing is just how they've been like flocking to the classes, and every time it's like the feedback has been like, we need this, we need this like every week. You know, you know, the space that they live in is really, it's quite poverty stricken. They don't have much space in their rooms. It's not the best environment to be in a recovery space. And there's no psychologists either. So I think that they don't have much access to anything that's supporting them on a mental health level, and not much on a like a yeah, like a spiritual healing level. So what's been happening is that, you know, we've been conducting these sessions now for a few months, and we've sent some feedback forms, and we've also been asking them, you know, in sessions, you know, to give us feedback. And just, you know, there's been a variety of feedback, some really amazing stories actually with some of them. But one of the things that has come up repetitively is just how much they are sleeping better and they're falling asleep. So even in the sessions, I mean, Ricky was telling me the other day, I wasn't there, but he said that about 80% of them just passed out in the inner dance session. This wasn't obviously a sleep playlist. It was just, I don't know what he played actually, but it doesn't seem to really matter. They're just falling asleep. I had quite a, you know, like I had an incident with one of the ladies. It was about 2-3 months ago, and she, you know, she fell asleep during the session. I didn't really think much of it. And at the end of the session, everyone was awake. We were in a circle and sharing, and she was just passed out. And I, you know, I was like, you know, maybe I should go wake her up. And the lady said, you know, that girl, she does not sleep, like ever. You know, she doesn't sleep. She has such trouble sleeping. So I actually just left her. And she shared with me the following time that her sleep had improved and she actually started to sleep better. So it's really the first time that I've had this type of feedback. I think because also we're working with them on a regular basis, it's been amazing to actually be able to track and see improvements. Yeah, what I'm getting a very strong feeling of is that, you know, or what I'm also understanding more as I'm learning, is that addiction, a very, very big part of that healing process, and it makes sense now because of what Pi was just sharing, is sleep. And if they're not sleeping well, how can they, you know, rejuvenate and heal and become, you know, for things to become more clearer? So I think that what I'm learning, what I'm seeing, is that sleep is a very, very big part of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think,
So, it now you're going into this direction where they're actually requesting that they have access to these sleep-based modes that they can even use during nighttime. I don't know if I heard you correctly,
Yeah, so
notion
they
is that,
have them.
yeah.
So they have them. So that's how they're doing. So they I actually gave the owner of the clinic, Josh and Home, about 2 months ago. And like I never got any feedback. Like I asked, and then I got like a strange response, and I didn't really she's not that great with communication, to be honest. So I gave these 3 playlists. I'm super curious, like what was happening with them. And in the last session that I held, that was that sharing that I shared yesterday, where that guy, because I think just before there was a bit of a part that I didn't send where we're kind of having a bit of a back and forth. Was like, have you guys accessed these playlists? And some of them had, some of them have never heard about it. They're like, please, like, send it. And they were talking about how they can send it to each other via the phone. And apparently they've all got these playlists now on their phones and they're kind of sharing them. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, I'm glad it's circulating. So, and like they were saying that the nights that they are playing that, they're just passing out. At least some of them are saying that. So I don't know how that's I guess, yeah, I mean, as I was just saying now, like what I'm assuming is that that is amazing, because it's helping them to heal faster. It's giving them more life force energy, I am assuming. I think it's also quite difficult for them because they're sharing rooms with other people, and it's loud and people are snoring. It's like and people are maybe detoxing. I don't know how it works, but apparently when one detoxes from drugs, it can be very intense. And some of the ladies were sharing that with me a few months ago. So I think what's really cool is how like something that I thought would be kind of weird and inaccessible, and like how do you bridge this into spaces. I think what I've been amazed at with this clinic, it's like this amazing testing ground that's happening for us. It's like this inner dance has become this thing that they're all talking about, and it's like they're like, what do they call it? Oh yeah, inner dancing. They're like, when are we going to are we looking forward to the inner dancing? They're like, yeah, it's like this hype, it's kind of weird, actually, as I'm saying it out loud. It's, I remember thinking many years ago about this, like, how do you bring this into, spaces like this? But there you go. I think that it's showing me more and more how, yeah, when I remember we had a conversation a long time ago when you said to me something about they're not ready for what you have to offer. It's blocked. And, I think it was to do with the teenagers or something. And these people are like ready. They're like asking for more. They're like, we want more. It's just so open and flowing. And it is actually amazing. I'm finding that other things that I'm doing here, like with inner dance, my regular classes are like not booked. I've got like, there's a very little happening in that regard. Maybe because I've also got other things going on in my life that I'm focusing on. But I must say, this work with the addiction clinic, yeah, it just feels like that's where the energy wants to go, right now. And training.
Yeah.
I'm feeling other things for next year, but not more just like senses. And so
So I have a question, like, because you're working with an institution then this is governed by people who are having to check things out if this is going to work. What was the what was it like to contextualize this for them? And are they now accepting this? And if they are, is it partly because of the feedbacks? How are they like seeing it? And what was the transition like on the way to getting this to where it's at?
Mm. So, you know, Ricky was the catalyst for this, which makes a lot of sense because Ricky is, I'm kind of a little bit more reserved, and I can be quite forthcoming when I'm in a comfortable space of the known. But Ricky is someone that talks about inner dance to anyone and everyone. And he's very direct. And someone introduced him to the owner of this clinic. And I think he just told her about what inner dance is. And she was curious. And she's like, oh, that sounds like something that we'd like to try. And Ricky phoned me and he's like, Lee, there's this clinic in this township and they're keen for us to come there and try. So we started out with these 8 women in November last year. And there was 20 women that were there at the time. And we said that we'd do sessions for all 20. So we divided them up into 2 groups. And so the feedback was, they were like, I think, quite wowed by it. And they really enjoyed it. And what I understand is that they went to Zilpha, who's the owner, and we didn't do feedback forms, anything like that at the time. So it was really just, them speaking to the owner and Ricky and I just making that commitment to let's go again next month and work with these women again. Let's actually do this again. So it was, and like this, I think because they, it sounded like they don't have really this type of support there. From what I saw on the website, and I think that they used to have yoga, but they don't have yoga anymore. It's a really poor community. We just kind of showed up as something that was different and something that brought this community some type of, I think at the time they didn't really maybe understand how deep it actually was going. But I think that she was just super open from the beginning. I think she's actually a very Christian based woman. Like she's very, like they play gospel music there the whole day, apparently. And, we've been told that they actually don't like that, but they keep playing this Christian gospel music. But at the same time, she's super open. And I know that because about 3 months ago, Ricky and I decided to invite her for coffee and have a talk to her, because that's when we wanted to, make all the suggestions about bringing in speakers into the rooms, bringing in these sleep playlists, talking to her about, doing other things with them. And so we had like almost a 2-hour chat over coffee, and she was so open. This like very kind of like simple woman, but just really open-minded. I think she just wants the best for these people, and she's like given her heart to this clinic. She's got like very little money that they get a month, donated to them, but she was willing to buy the speakers. Like we actually were going to, get money to donate. She's like, no, she'll buy the speakers and I must send her the playlists. And I think that So it feels like it's been two-part. She's just been really open. And I think Ricky and I, both of us have been just really consistent with let's just show up every single month and just keep going. And once we had the meeting with her, which was about 2 months ago, she shared with us many, many things that we didn't know. And one of them was that there's like 10 times more men than women. And we didn't know that because we'd only been working with the women. So Ricky stepped up, and Ricky doesn't work. So he's got lots of free time. And he said, listen, I'm going to do a session with these men every single week and just kind of like, you know, I, I get this going. And Ricky, started to find donations for blankets and yoga mats. And I also did a poster, like, so we kind of like, and now we've got like a ton of yoga mats and blankets and cushions. And Ricky has just really manifested so much of that. And he does it like so effortlessly. So but I also believe that it's happened because it's just in flow. Like it's felt so it's felt so effortless. As they're giving feedback to us, we've just actioned. And it's I wish that I actually had more time, to be honest, like to dedicate more time to it. But at the moment, while Ricky is there and he's doing a little bit more than me, but we've got a session next week again. There'll be 20 people, I think men and women together. So yeah, as we're getting feedback, we also are understanding more about what they need. So Ricky's gone to their premises and done talks on a goal setting, and we've like, I think because there's other elements that are maybe it's not just about inner dance. I think that's also what Ricky and I are starting to see, is that inner dance is one of the things that we can offer, but there's actually more. It could be like meditation, it could be just, belief systems and changing those, thought patterns. So for me, I'm finding this personally it's just the growth for me as a space holder. I mean, it's just another level. It's just another level, I think, because they don't really have much. And I think for them I'm also just seeing how, I don't know, like the inner dance, it's like a deeper, it's I don't know how to explain it, but it's the same, but it's not the same. And I think it's because of the context of the people that
Yeah,
that we're holding,
yeah,
it's
totally.
just not the same, but I
It,
don't know
it
what
it's
it means.
the context. If I could contextualize what you said about the teenagers, I didn't really use the word block, but we could use that. My point back then when we were having conversation, so Lee was interested in focusing on bringing inner dance process to the young people, like the teenagers. But by the time that she was really trying to kickstart that process, context could be either cultural, geographical, but that was more historical, where it was right when COVID-19 effects were like going away or decreasing, and normalcy was starting to come back. So what I was seeing was to try to bring a deep process to a whole bunch of young people who had been pulled down for so long. They were just excited to go back to the world, to stimulate. So I didn't feel that maybe there was an opening as much. So taking this into consideration, let's say the work in Manila with Rosa, with the Manila City Jail, there's so many correlations with what you're doing because those people don't have space. You're talking about maybe one jail cell, 60 people. They're literally sleeping on top of each other. There's no space. There's no time to breathe. So they actually look forward to the weekly inner dance process that's happening with Paul, because the vibration gives them space. Otherwise, they don't have the mental space. The vibration gives them space. It's the same with the way you're describing this. So what we're realizing through your sharing is we need to look for the opening. We need to find the opening, and you guys found the opening where people are more open because of the fact that there's a need. But when people are excited, when people are still motivated or stimulated, wanting to get out the world, look for the job, look for a career, it's not really a bona fide opening right now. But to relate it to the initial thoughts in this call, to channel what's going on in Cape Town, where the way you describe it, like there's this constant fight or flight. So cortisol levels are super high from birth, from womb to tomb, from birth to death. People are always in this war. So now that you guys are
I don't know
providing inner
what's
dance, right?
going on right now.
Yeah,
Sorry
yeah,
to
yeah,
interrupt.
yeah, yeah. So I didn't hear you. Say it again, or just feel
No,
free
I
to
said I don't know if you know what's going on here right now, but there's like a whole
speak it.
taxi war going.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Yeah. So it's almost like the vibration we're holding is putting like a rest state or like a slowing down of this thing that's usually like super duper sped up. So I think you guys have so much going for you. I'm glad we can have a great listen tonight on this. And like one of the ideas I had was communities need to support these projects, like Studios Mundos, or the inner dance community at large could definitely support projects like these that are needing consistency. So definitely call on us. If there's anything, we would like this to just happen year long. So yeah, I guess given all these, then given as well that fight or flight and stress is happening globally, um, feeling inspired, challenged, illuminated. Let's open this call for everyone, um, around like insights, ideas, questions that are coming up in the last hour and a half or more. What do you guys pick up? Initially, we were talking about sleep, but it seems like it's a lot bigger. But in general, maybe there's like like things you're seeing here. Isabel. Yeah, we can hear you speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Good afternoon. I don't know how to use the cell phone, the Zoom. Well, I was wondering, well, I was listening, which I was giving the attention I could according to the moment. So I was catching up some ideas, others not. But in my process, what I'm feeling is that during daytime, during non-sleeping hours, there has to be like something very stable inside, which will be some um, biochemistry specific. Okay. Um, and this is like the center, like the middle point, and something has really to be there no matter what, and you can be very active, uh, and maybe the physical activity or that requires another chemistry at that very moment, but there's like this background. So I was wondering that we were talking about the chemistry during sleep, but wouldn't at the end be the same, the chemistry, the biochemistry in sleep and during daytime?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
If
good one.
yeah,
I'm dealing with this irony, Isabel and everyone, because when I first facilitated this work, this thing called inner dance to the world 70 years ago, the grand paradox here is that I was not sleeping. I'm sure you've heard this from me before, that I actually killed sleep. I don't know if any one of you are familiar with Macbeth by Shakespeare, but there's this line there that Macbeth doth murder sleep. So I murdered sleep where I wasn't sleeping. So my thesis back then was, when you hit a certain brainwave chemistry, you don't actually need to sleep. For me, the only reason why we sleep is to achieve balance, which in inner dance would be like a REM entrainment. So this is me like putting a Molotov cocktail or a ballistic missile into this conversation where we're honoring sleep. But a lot of my inner dance framework actually comes from not needing to sleep at all when you get there. So for me, if I was to look back at my brain state when I first came back into the world after my time at the island, I think I was able to hold a lot of delta power or delta brainwave activity even as I was going back into like language, people's anxieties, talking to my mom, my sister, my brother, my friends, and so on and so forth, like getting used to human things. I was able to hold this really deep, almost non-human wave that's not attached, not so later on I learned to sleep again. The beings that taught me how to sleep the most were my babies, my kids, because I had to get used to the rhythms. I had to teach myself how to sleep again. The second was food. When you eat more food, you get sleepy. But to reflect in your question in terms of awake, there's something really paradoxical about this. So I think we're trying to realize what the optimal state is while we're sleeping. But if you can actually receive that or recreate that or simulate that while you're awake, then it doesn't actually matter. And we call that the dream, right? It makes sense in that sense through paradox. So there's something really interesting, weird about this. So your question actually generates a lot of insight that's very consequential. Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, who else has something around this subject? Okay, Katarina, Belgium. Can't believe we might actually see you tomorrow already. Okay.
Yes, it's interesting because I listened to the playlist, the sleepy one, yesterday evening, and the first one was 10 days ago. And I wanted to share like an experience about it. So the first one I listened to the sleeping one 10 days ago. I have a very stressful job. Like I'm running all the day long, and I work in the middle of the city, Brussels. So it's very busy, very stressful. And even though I was aware that I'm running all the time, 8 hours a day. What the main awareness, the main shift I had with listening to this playlist was like during the afternoon, the day after listening to this playlist, I just stopped and I really felt my heart beating so fast. And as soon as I felt I'm telling you this, but it looks so crazy and so simple that I was thinking, oh, man, why I haven't been aware of that earlier, right? But I just stopped and I literally I could feel my heart beating so fast. And I stopped everything. And I was aware that I was running so fast all the day long. I was so stressful, and I just stopped everything. And I could start again I was in my work, so I couldn't change anything. But it's like, okay, I could change something about being like another rhythm, I would say. And that for me was huge, even though it's very small, very little. And at the same time, I was thinking about all the people around me. So it's in the middle of the city, and actually we're doing all the same thing, running and rushing. And I say, how can we? I'm not saying really about changing something. I don't know actually, but it was really about being aware of this heart beating so fast. And I was wondering, maybe like a few people are aware of they are running and knowing that their heart is beating so fast. So for me, it was very huge. And yesterday I had a thing with this playlist that I have a hard time to listen to it. I can feel that the mind is judging, like, oh, I don't like the sound or the thing. And for some reason, yesterday I stopped the playlist. It was like too much. I had so much anxiety while listening to the playlist. And I just stopped it. So I said, okay, just stop. And I slept so well. I slept so well. So I couldn't really I had so much anxiety while listening to it awake, but I really slept so well. And I had some kind of addiction, and I noticed this morning that, okay, so the addiction that I have with behavior and with food and all those kind of things, okay, I did the same thing, but not the same moment in time. So it has like a delay, of 15 or 30 minutes. And after that, I started to back with my addiction, like behavior. So yes, for me, it looks like, okay, maybe subtle or very small or tiny, but very important. And yes, I wanted to share that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I have two thoughts. They've been running through my brain through this call. One thing I would think about that's quite radical and super meta is that sleep is actually a technology. It's something that we invented in order to evolve. We take it for granted so that when you hear the word sleep, you just think of what you think you know. But what if we actually invented sleep, and the sleep cycle would be part of that invention, because we needed to learn how to conserve energy when we would go more into energy consumption, the way you're describing Brussels, right? Which could just as well be Paris or Berlin or Barcelona or Manila. So, like, I like to think of things in that way. Like, sleep is an evolution, it's like an invention, it's something we needed to invent in order to balance out, so that when we would lose REM state consciousness, then we could at least reserve a small percentage of the day, or the circadian rhythm, circa 24 hours, circa DM, in order to achieve balance. Because there are animals that actually don't sleep, like dolphins. They're able to hold REM state quality like the whole day. So I like this sharing that you hold about your experimentations with the REM sleep playlists, because I think that people who have been exposed to the energy, and you've been with Inner Dance since 2017, 2018. It's been years, and we're really processing things. You're bound to reach dimensions that weren't there before. So we're not here to recycle or to repeat things that we've been through before. It doesn't make sense to actually just keep going in a circle. So there's something about human consciousness that keeps actually going farther, even though it seems like we're going back. I'm a firm believer in addiction, in a way that I feel there's something as a state of consciousness that's going beyond what we've known before. So the reason why we go to certain foods, beverages, or psychotropic mechanisms is because we're able to hold time and space like a lot more than what was possible. And people have always used food, drink, and psychotropic mechanisms in order to stretch out the waves that weren't as possible before, until such time that we don't need them as much. So there's something about you actually going into this paradox of, okay, there's this wave coming, but you shutting it off means that you can find it inside, not through entrainment, but through like active choosing, and then like emanating those waves inside, meaning the playlist is now inside you, which is the opposite of addiction, which is really amazing. So I think there's a lot more to this, but what you shared like holds a lot already in our presentation. So yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes when we take this to Belgium, starting tomorrow. Like finally, like we land there. Been dreaming about this for so long. It's crazy. Gra, you've got your hands raised. You've been taking like a lot of notes last like almost 2 hours. Do feel free to share.
Hi, I don't know if this is a note, but I was backtrapping or looking back at my own journey with the new playlists, actually, because I've been listening to them while I was sleeping since January. So it's not just a sleep playlist that I've been exploring with. I took it a little bit far, maybe. And every new playlist, I would just play them. Sometimes, like, even 2 playlists at night. I wake up during nighttime and put another playlist. And I was actually never analyzing what was happening or what was coming up after this. So now listening to Katarina, I was like, oh, what is happening to me now since it's been since January? I do notice that my dreams, like I have been dreaming more and I remember them more. But what is interesting now is they are still retro casual, like, and sometimes even, I guess it's even more, I'm having even more of those experiences. But something happened with my emotions, because I have now dreams that are very, very packed with emotions. Like just this morning, I had like this dream, which was a mix of many things. And of course, there are symbols there that I recognize, but the emotional content is like insane, that I have like to cry for 2 hours, you know. It's really, really, really intense. And I feel that my sensitivity like to things is a little bit heightened as well. And my awareness to different waves, you know, like sometimes during the day I just feel like something different coming up, and then after that there is like a flash of something. And also, like, what maybe is the most interesting part for me is that I'm having more of those moments in which during the day I don't feel that things are real. I think I've shared this during one call recently, that I was walking in the street and I was like, nothing of this is real. I can just kill somebody right now, that it doesn't make any difference, which is like nihilism or whatever. But this actually keeps happening more often now. And I was like, what is happening with my brain, my emotional brain? And now also that I'm looking at the recordings from the last trainings, I don't know if this is something to deal with the changes or activations in the reptilian brain, or how it is that something is communicating there that is making this, I don't know, things are so intense, really, like they are coming to a very different fact things, and it is related to my cycles of sleep as well. I sleep more, and I actually never had problems sleeping in my life. I slept in the floor during the typhoon for 12 hours on a wet floor. So it's
Yes.
like I am that
I
person that
didn't
really
understand that.
yeah, so I don't have problems sleeping, but this actually never changed in inner dance. Like I actually have been sleeping more, so this is also part of my exploration. Like, but on the food thing, since I've started experimenting with the plates, I do see differences with the food relationship that I had, which I was really way more addictive, as you may remember.
Yes, to
Addicted to
that
food
too.
and
Yeah.
stuff. But that has changed. If I look back now, I'm like more controlled ways with food and all of that. Yeah, I guess this is my feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really good because it interrelates the many threads that have been brought up throughout the whole call. But based on what Katarina and you were speaking, it's almost like we're harkening back to a Freudianism, or this sense that dream time is actually a time to be able to process things that are difficult to process when some people are taking care of the kids, some people are having to do the laundry, some people just need to just get busy. So why not be able to process things when we are sleeping? And in what we think is unconscious, but actually the unconscious is a much bigger conscious kind of state. But then when you're able to carry that over to what is conscious, that which is unconscious, so that when you're still dreaming whilst you're awake, would that also mean that you're able to process the things that are kind of hard to process when people need to go to work or need to, so that's kind of a dream, to go into the dream whilst awake or asleep. And that demands a lot of safety and context, because normally that just sounds crazy, because then you're not in control, you're not in order, you're not organized, you're not normal. And that's almost never okay in a normal environment. So I think it really is good to be able to harness more time and space to process the things that are difficult to process, because there's just so much. So I think there's a lot there in what you guys are sharing. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else has ideas, experiences around this sleep or playlist, or there's a lot about addiction coming up? Joanna, yeah.
Yes. So I wanted to share something as well, can relate to some things that I think it was Katarina and Gra shared before. Sorry, I have a bit of a cold. So since I started listening to Josh playlist because not that I had specific issues with sleep. I was just curious because everybody was talking about it at some point, and I was like, oh, I'm curious, and I didn't really think it's gonna have any specific effect, or I was not looking for anything specific, and yeah, I was very, very surprised. Like that first time I used it, I overslept, even though I never ever overslept to work in my life. Like I can wake up easily in the morning with the light or with alarm, but I was actually, despite the light or alarm, I was asleep. And I did feel more rested and more focused the next day, but I carry on listening to it quite regularly to see other effects. And I was wondering, and maybe this could be even a question, if, because I remember Pai, you once said about that hypothalamus, how it kind of helps with some releasing of some hormones or endocrine system. And I did notice for some time that I'm feeling like having something with hormones, like feeling of temperature, like we normally feel in the beginning of inner dance. I notice like I'm feeling more cold, some changes in like metabolism as well, and but I think around the body temperature. So I wasn't sure if that could be something related to also working with that hypothalamus.
Yeah.
But I'm observing the things that are happening, and I would be curious to explore more of the sleep playlists.
This is a really good question, which actually is already insightful into itself. So the hypothalamus isn't just something that influences some hormones. It's like the one that influences almost all the hormones, if not all. It's like a central governing body. It's like a bus station where then all the vehicles leave from. It's like an airport, almost. So without going into too many technical details, like we talked about cortisol today, the part of the hypothalamus that influences cortisol control is the paraventricular nucleus, which is also responsible for oxytocin, vasopressin, and thyroid hormone, a lot of which are, major regulatory bodies that a lot of this is very emotions based, very much that which we don't control over, but which controls us. For me, that's emotional, very response based, very reactive. What's not so reactive is that which manages the body clock. So that's hypothalamic. It's the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, instructs the pineal gland that when it's time to go to sleep, then the pineal needs to send out melatonin so that then we can go into the dream state. So there's a part that's regulated through a cycle, that when your body temperature is supposed to go up, then it goes up, and then when it's supposed to go down, it's supposed to go down. Something interesting that you're talking about is you can actually regulate that through conditions that you set, so that you're not actually enslaved by the body clock. Because when you're enslaved by the body clock, you're enslaved by patterns, you're enslaved by conditioning, which means that you're enslaved by history, which means that all of the experiences of the human getting exposed to the seasons or through the dark light cycle, you're forever trapped by it. See what I mean? So when you expose yourself to certain conditions that can shift the body clock is super ancient. It's super old. So that means we're programmed, we're simulations, we're not acting according to our own will. So what does it mean to actually deprogram yourself, to change your program? So the hypothalamus holds a lot of that programming. So if you have a chance to deprogram your hypothalamus, you can actually change not just you, but the whole species that's with you, if you know what I mean. You know, if the hypothalamus is the thing that manages all your endocrine systems. We were talking with Gra earlier before people came into the call. There's this difference between circuitry and chemistry. So a lot of people could have this amazing experience, this big experience where boom, something explodes, they go to the universe. That's amazing, but a lot of those could actually be very short term. It could be fantastic, but a lot of those are merely circuitry to do with brain states. When you talk about brain states, the changes could be big, but they're very short term. Okay, when you change the endocrine system, the change can be incremental, very, very small, but the changes last a long time. So that's why the sleep playlists are interesting, because if you make that habitual, then you can make incremental changes that are long lasting. So what's interesting about the hypothalamus is that the extensions from the hypothalamus into either the anterior or the posterior part of the pituitary are either an endocrine or neural, which is to say the hypothalamus is technically not part of the brain if it's an endocrine gland, but it's also part of the brain. So it's actually a bridge between circuitry and chemistry, or long-term and short-term changes in the system. So I'm just talking about programming here. If you're deprogramming and reprogramming yourself, the short-term changes are important, a lot of which can be managed through the sessions that we hold. But the more long-term programming is actually really, really important if a real change is going to happen. So a lot of the interest in the inner dance in the beginning was about circuitry, and it's only as of late that we've been going into chemistry. Chemistry manages long-term changes. That's why we are talking about the endocrine system a lot, and the hypothalamus is the governing system for the endocrine system. It's either electricity or chemicals, but then we can hold both. That's actually really cool. I think this is something facilitators should become more and more aware of. So yeah, thank you. I think there's a lot there. Okay, anyone else would like to share? Gra, yeah, you unmuted.
Yeah, I think I was able to see what I needed to see about the thing with the emotions.
The thing,
because
yeah.
they do the thing with the emotions. Because like they do feel, in the sense, like they longer and more intense, and they are really like stuff that normally I was not aware of. But then, like, looking at now how maybe there is a change within the cortisol and the hormones related to this, like there's something that is finding its own rhythm to process like this deep thing that is really like childhood stuff, like that you start journaling about your father and then 2 hours just crying, and it's something that before, I don't know if it's related to the thing with the circuitry thing, like since it was like, because these things, they always come up, you know, like what I see in my processes is that usually I go back into processing the same things, like, okay, another layer of the daddy issue, another layer of the sexual abuse, funny. But like, not never in this intensity that, oh wow, okay, I need to really sit down with this now and like just allow this to come in whatever shape, which I usually like just do that. But I've been seeing how the length of time has been different, and how my reactions to things are also different, and how also it has been impacting, like little by little, whatever is also that I'm seeing in the other parts of the dreams, you know.
Yeah.
So it is hypothalamus, something in the hypothalamus.
Yeah, totally. Like if I could just take this further, when you think about circuitry, what it can really do is it can alter a state of awareness, right? So when people, let's say, take a drug, or people go into something that brings about ecstasy, there's like an expanded state of awareness. So that's very much circuitry, which can be short term. It could be amazing, but it often doesn't last long. But an endocrine system would allow it to sustain. So it's one thing to alter a state of consciousness. It's another thing to sustain it. So when you talk about emotion, let's say, okay, I had it once, I had it twice, I had it thrice, but does it mean to actually? So when you think about an altered state of awareness, in a way, it's actually just a body or cognitive way of holding more. It's like, okay, I can hold more information. Sometimes that can be emotional. It's like, oh my God, this is just so much. I'm overwhelmed. But when you ground that by way of insight, where you can see more, let's say you're establishing synaptic connections, you're myelinating synapses, axons, so that you can send more information with greater distance across many directionalities. And then you can just keep structuring that so that you're not looping, you're literally constructing like a new mind. Then you can to loop is just to keep going back into the same terms, the same emotion, the same concept, the same feeling, but you're not growing. You're not actually creating dimensions that they're deeper or higher than what you were holding as a simplification. So I think that the thing that allows something to be more than just an emotion is that it becomes like a learning process. When you think of trauma is actually a learning process, because when people start to avoid certain things because they got hurt, and then they're not looking at it anymore, they learn that by creating a habit. Like trauma is also a learning process, because when you fire certain neurons together and you keep wiring them in that way, you strengthen a connection. But another way of learning is to unlearn the old connection and then to establish new connections. So there's something about emotion that when you're able to observe the emotion, even as you're emoting, then a possible change can happen. Not just from the mind, but from the body level. So I think where you're speaking from now is that there's a way of allowing for both the thing that's being stored in the body, and then the ability to see more, to coexist at the same time. I think that could be a more effective way of bringing about transformation, because you're not bypassing or shortcutting something or escaping something that exists in the body because it was stored. You're actually allowing for a resolution to take place because you're able to hold like something old and something new I think it's always going to have to be both of those at the same time. So circuitry and chemistry is there because you can't really necessarily know something that's new that's not going to be based on something old. Like body and mind doesn't work in that way. You need to keep growing by way of working with what is there, and then to create something new out of it, you actually need to always borrow something from the old and then construct something new out of that. It takes great talent to be able to do both. Where people get stuck is they take the old and then they just keep pretending that that's something new, but it's actually just circulating something. You need to resonate with something very spectral that holds like spectrum or a range that like stretches out things. So based on conditioning and programming, when we think about the body through endocrine systems and like like nervous systems, but even like the way your heart beats, the way like we have these response mechanisms of breathing or like pulsating depending on what's happening outside. One way of conducting change is to expose yourself to things that used to scare you. So it could be like, okay, I don't want to think about that trauma. When you then become brave and expose yourself to something that triggers you, but you're not scared, even though you're getting triggered, something new can come out of that. Because if you just, let's say, okay, I want to create something new, so I'm going to avoid the old. But the more you actually avoid that, the more you actually store it. That doesn't change. It just hides something. When you're able to respond to something differently that's acting on the same pattern, I think that's when a change really happens. And then the more you keep exposing yourself to that so that you achieve like a new normal, and I hate that term completely, but when you're able to create a new normal, I think that's the formula for real transformation. So there's something in inner dance that's actually avoidant in its traditional setting. There's something in the way we've been using music that actually has a lot of escape routes and bypassing mechanisms, and we're learning how to maybe hold that more objectively, if you will. But it requires that we just understand the process a lot more, and that we can speak about it in this way through more structure and awareness without losing the emotive like feeling and authentic state. Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Who else has like things? Celine, welcome.
I might drop off very soon. I think maybe it was half a year before I found inner dance. I went for my first meditation boot camp, the 10 days Vipassana. I think one of the things that stuck with me was during the video lectures, recorded video lectures that we would watch in the evenings. It was mentioned that human beings only need 4 hours of sleep to repair and regenerate, and every other hour at anything over that 4 hours is for emotional, psychological maintenance and repair. And so the meditation itself is supposed to, among other things, one of the things is to help people learn to work with their emotions later on, when I came across inner dance and he talked about the ways, I will also remember something else from the meditation teachings, because it's always like rising and falling, observing thoughts and emotions rising and falling, and knowing that it just passes. And I think I've talked about it to you before, and I've heard many people talk about it in the inner dance, how something that's really scary or traumatic can be experienced again, but without the charge that it previously had. Like it's like being in the situation again where something was terrifying, and then you're there, and you can then just make the different choices without being driven by fear or anger or whatever the initial emotion was. And I remember, I mean, this is anecdotal, but my dad, when he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, he responded to, I think, 3 or 4 different treatments really well initially, and then it would plateau and drop off. And throughout I think like it was maybe 8 to 10 months after his diagnosis, one of the things that was really puzzling to me was his sleep. It was even before his diagnosis, his sleep, because he did not go into sleep paralysis. So every time he had a dream, he would physically respond. What you were saying about the cortisol levels not coming down enough. I'm guessing that's probably what was happening in his situation. So he would respond to different drugs or chemotherapy and even an experimental therapy, and then it would plateau because never got to the point where he could his body could integrate it enough, his cortisol could not come down. And that was then later on, again, this is my own observation, I think it was because he was holding something inside that he couldn't speak. My dad's family was nominally Buddhist, but he never really studied it. He just carried out the rituals, the duties that was expected, because he was the oldest son of an Asian family. But I guess he went to Catholic school. He learned the scriptures. He had very deep affinity, and his teachers who were priests were his kind of like father figures, because his own dad was pretty absent from working multiple jobs to raise the family. So I think over the years he actually thought about it, about wanting to explore Christianity more, and he never ever spoke about it at all. And I think it was like maybe a couple of weeks before he passed on. It was just before Christmas, actually. He said that I had switched some lights and changed the lighting in the living room. And then he saw, because of the switch in the lighting, a cross appear on the pattern of the front door. And so he took that as a sign. And finally he said something and asked his brother-in-law, who was a pastor, to, like if he could become a Christian without actually going to church. And and so he did. He said he wanted to become Christian. The rest of the family was like, do whatever makes you happy. And then I think actually he felt a lot more at peace after that. He's just kind of happy. And later on, at his funeral, his psychologist, who I made him go to see, she came and she told us actually he had mentioned this to her during their second session together. And he didn't tell the rest of our family for another, I think about 7 months. Yeah. So that was something that and most recently when you were in Singapore, so this is jumping away now, that's the end of my dad's story there. And then when you were in Singapore recently, you had a second session. One of the women who was there, I've been seeing her a long time for PTSD, but also actually probably complex PTSD. And she was saying she was so happy after the session. Not because she saw colors or anything. She's so happy because she didn't fall asleep. Because that for her, that's her coping mechanism. She shuts down completely. She can be in a public space, in a public transport or hawker center, and when she's triggered or really stressed, she shuts down and she freezes. She can't speak. She can't move. And so she has been to other music or sound healing related sessions, and sometimes she does just completely fall asleep, because I think it gets to the point where it's her body's coping, but also avoidance when something is going to come up. And later on, I think it was maybe a week or so, 2 weeks from there, when I met up with her again for a counseling session, but I asked her about her inner dance experience, because I told her to also, if she could keep a record of her sleep after the session. And she said her sleep had been improving a lot. Like she started sleeping from 4 a.m. She'd go to bed at 3 a.m., 2 a.m., and getting quite close to a more regular sleep cycle. But one of the things she was telling me that just came out where she was like, oh, she went open sea swimming. And prior to that, she actually is a certified swim coach, but she couldn't work for a long time because she didn't feel safe around other people. So yeah, even when she went to the public pool to swim, she couldn't swim laps because unless it was really empty or she was in a space where she felt safe, she couldn't swim laps. But after that, she went open sea swimming, not alone, but with other people. And I can't remember her exact words, but it was about how, there'll always be waves and waves, and just to keep going forward and breathing and staying with the breath, and then life goes on, something along those lines. And then a month after that, we had another session, and usually before the session, I asked her to think about what she wanted to work on, her goal for the session. And unlike all the previous sessions where usually it's an issue with conflict or family or things like that, that session, she was saying that she was in a very good space, and she wanted to know how she could maintain that. Yeah, so that was what we worked on that session. And most recently, I asked if she still needed another session, like once a month I'll check in. And she's right now she's like, oh no, she's taking on a new commission. She's also a very very good botanical artist, but she couldn't draw for long. Like, she has the drawing equivalent of aphasia. So she said now she's agreed to do a demo drawing video, and so she's gotten past that block now. She's drawing again. And maybe okay, maybe this also ties into, there was a parallel with my dad's situation. So the reason I was first put in touch with her was she was going to a social welfare service organization that didn't have any counselors or psychologists and stuff. So they will mainly help their clients with financial issues, but she was there because she was in a domestic abuse situation, and specifically it was a physical strangulation that obviously she survived. So yeah, she also had a lot of fear over speaking what she wanted to say for a long time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think what the first thing you shared was quite interesting in terms of meditation, that you're talking about that meditation course where it was talked about that, like in just those like 4 hours you're able to process the biological elements that need to be processed, and then what was beyond that would be the non-biological, which would be the emotional or the psychological, even the cognitive.
Yeah.
So I think if we were to talk to doctors and practitioners in general, like one central theme that would tie in a lot of these concepts that were brought up throughout this call, and there were many, would be what would be the source or the root cause of so many problems humans deal with. Talking about cortisol, another concept underneath stress would be fear. Listening to Lee talk about the cases in South Africa where people grow up in these really threat-based atmospheres. So talk to a medical doctor, there could then be these formulations in fear from a biological perspective. Talk to a psychologist, then we're processing fear from a cognitive, emotional, or psychological dimension. We're arriving at a cognitive science or a unitive philosophy where why can't they just be the same? The mind and the body have correlations with each other. But then this last thing that Celine shared is interesting, where vibratory states are somewhere beyond the body and the mind. It's either neither biological or psychological, but it could be both. So that when you have someone who has physical and psychological components of fear both, when reordering or reframing or healing that involves a vibration is provided, why does that then help in the healing of suffering at its source, which is both body and mind? Vibration holds both. So I do find this thing that Sadi shared about Christianity and Buddhism, they're both structures of belief. Buddhism, from an Eastern spiritual construct, is about canceling the body, and it's everything is there. That's like, when you think of the spiritual practice, it's to sit down and to not move, to cancel things out, and like God is nothingness that holds the space. And when you look at Christianity, where God is not like this consciousness. God is an entity. It's something that you actually speak to. It's not the nothingness, it's the everything. It's the all-encompassing that is a consciousness. Buddhism is about that which is non-conscious. The very practice of Buddhism is to shut down the thinking process. So somehow body and mind, all these dualities, they're talking to each other. They're representing everything that is north and south, masculine and feminine, hot and cold. And somehow, whether it be in the mind or in the body, we're able to hold polarities, dualisms, paradoxes, contradictions. So we're not deciding anymore whether like this is better and that's worse. Achieving somehow like a balance. And somehow if we can do that, whether we're asleep or awake, that's the way to go. I think we're too decisive and opinionated, subjective, and thus preferential. And this is one manifestation or outcome of fear, that we're avoiding the things that cause pain, and we're trying to create situations that would cause pleasure, which is what motivates modern humans. Why do you get up in the morning? It's okay, I wanna experience more good stuff and avoid bad stuff. So when people then speak about these experiences, like what Celine shares, where okay, I used to avoid that, I used to get triggered by that, I used to get scared by that, interrelating that with everything everyone has shared so far in Africa, now in Asia, and then in Europe. I think humans are like formulating around this non-dual concept or context or coding that was more of an original state that's either pre-human or post-human, but it's definitely not human. Like right now, it's much better to have opinions, to be able to decide whether this is good or bad. But what is it about this experience of laying down to a vibration where you're able to hold both? It doesn't sound human, but can live in the human, can be held in very, very human, very normal, very everyday situations. Yeah, so I think this has been quite a big call. It's yeah, I think we can learn a lot from everything everyone has shared. Yeah, I want to open up the space in case anyone else would like to share anything. But it feels full already, like it's so many ways. We were talking about sleep, but we ended up talking about like so many other things. So I guess let's just let it go. Send everyone off into their dream states for those who are quite late into the evening. Thank you for staying up. Let's keep the conversation alive in our shared groups. Yeah, Yutili and I are about to travel tomorrow, so I don't know how available we are going to be, but probably we still would. So we actually just fit this in. We always gather on Tuesdays, and it just felt like it made sense to honor a lot of the ongoing work that's been. There's some really new things that are coming up, so thank you for the feedbacks. They're really valuable, and thank you so much for that. Thank you to Cape Town, like what you're sharing, Lee, is actually really amazing, and it just feels like you're just starting. It's really just starting, even though it sounds really big. You're at the cusp of something big. And I hope that inspires all of us to find the openings through synchronicity, through will, through choice, awake or half asleep. Yeah, I think it's amazing what's happening there, and the fact that it's starting to also get mirrored in different places in the world. I think that we're really looking for a way inner dance gets grounded, like in this way. Yeah, right. Okay, so thank you, everyone. If you could unmute and just help all of us to close the call. Yeah, really enjoy this one.
Yeah, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a
Bye.
nice trip.
Thank you.
We will try.
Bye-bye.
Christina, have a good trip. Christina is
Oh,
moving
yeah.
to Maya. She's actually leaving Mallorca, and she's the first one to move to Palawan, the Philippines. So wish her
Yeah.
luck. She's quite anxious.
Bye.
The best and
Okay.
worst luck, Christina.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Mm,
You.
mm.